Consideration of memorials. Will the clerk please read the title of Senate Joint Memorial 1?
Senate Joint Memorial 1, Senator Rodriguez, Representative Froelich, memorializing former Representative and Senator Dottie Wham.
Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption of Senate Joint Memorial 001 and request that it be read at length.
Will the clerk please read Senate Joint Memorial 1 at length?
Senate Joint Memorial 1, Senators Rodriguez and Representative Froelich, memorializing former Representative and Senator Dottie Wham. Whereas Dorothy Dottie Stone Cipher Wham departed this life on October 20th, 2019, and whereas Dottie was born in Centralia, Illinois on January 5th, 1925, and whereas Dottie received a bachelor's degree from McMurray College, a master's degree from the University of Illinois, and an honorary doctorate from McMurray College as a distinguished alumna, and whereas Dottie married her high school sweetheart, Robert Wham, on January 26, 1947, and whereas Bob and Dottie moved from Illinois to Montrose, Colorado in 1950, and then moved to Denver in 1953, and whereas Dottie served as the regional director for Colorado and Wyoming for the federal domestic volunteer agency known as Action for 10 years, and whereas Dottie served in the Colorado House of Representatives from 1983 to 1986, and in the Colorado Senate from 1986 to 2000, and whereas Dottie served as chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee for 12 years, and whereas Dottie was the first person to chair the Senate Judiciary Committee who is not an attorney, and whereas during her legislative career, Dottie served as the prime sponsor for 321 House and Senate bills, of which 243 were enacted into law, and whereas one of the accomplishments of which Senator Wham was very proud was her work to establish a trauma system throughout the state to ensure that persons injured by trauma were taken to the most appropriate facility as quickly as possible. And whereas the establishment of the trauma system took 9 years of work with other legislators, rural and urban hospitals, patient representatives, fire departments, and professional associations of physicians, nurses, and emergency medical technicians, and whereas that system is still in place and operating smoothly today, and whereas other bills of note carried by Dottie Wham include bills to establish confidential testing for the HIV virus, establishment of a system to test all newborn infants in the state for hearing loss, standards and procedures for advance directives for end-of-life care, and several omnibus criminal justice bills. And whereas Dottie Wham was recognized by the Honorable Scott McGinnis on the floor of the United States House of Representatives on May 23, 2000, as the, quote, citizen legislator ideal, unquote, and as, quote, a model that every official in elected office should seek to emulate, unquote, and by the Honorable Diana DeGette on November 15, 2019, as a, quote, true public servant in every sense of the word, unquote, who had a, quote, deep and unwavering commitment to work across the political aisle to get things done for her community, unquote. And whereas Dottie Wham will be remembered for her humor, compassion, practicality, and her integrity, in addition to being a good friend and a good citizen. And whereas it is fitting that we, the members of the General Assembly, pay tribute to the dedicated service of Representative and Senator Dorothy Stone Cipher Wham and express our deep regret and sorrow occasioned by her death. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate of the 74th General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the House of Representatives concurring herein, that in the death of Dorothy Stone Cipher Wham, the people of the state of Colorado have lost a dedicated public servant and outstanding citizen, and that we, the members of the General Assembly, do hereby extend our deep and heartfelt sympathy to the members of her family and pay tribute to a woman who served the state well and faithfully. Be it further resolved that copies of this joint memorial be sent to Representative and Senator Wham's children, Nancy Mitchell of Franktown, Dr. Jean Ryan of Austin, Texas, Robert Wham of Bothell, Washington, and her grandchildren.
Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's my honor to offer this memorial for Senator Wham. Although I did not know her personally, I did a lot of research and talked to a lot of people, whether who served with her and people who work out in the lobby. She was considered the grande dame of the General Assembly. She was a very powerful person in the Assembly, and a lot couldn't be done without her. She and her husband moved to Montrose, Colorado in 1950 after attending school in Illinois. In 1953, they moved to Denver, and Dottie began her public service on the Colorado Civil Rights Commission. As a Republican, she was first elected to the Colorado House in 1984, and in 87, she was appointed to fill a vacancy in the Senate, where she served until 2000. She was the chairperson of the Senate Judiciary Committee from 89 until her retirement from the Senate. She was involved in many policies in health policy, including treatment for AIDS, early childhood education, and mental health issues. She was recognized as Legislator of the Year by the Colorado Trial Lawyers Association and the Public Service Lifetime Achievement Award by the Colorado Nonprofit Association. Senator Wham passed away in October 2019. While we were dealing with COVID, we could not do this earlier, and honored to have this first memorial set up in her honor today. She was a champion for reproductive health. On her death, she asked for donations to go to Planned Parenthood. And on that, Senator, I renew my motion. Oops, where did I lose my space? Oh, that's it. Oh, quickly. I'd like to recognize the family and the legislators are here. So when I call your name, the family members that are here, if you'd please stand so we could recognize you. I have daughters Nancy and husband Ron Mitchell, and their daughter Mary and husband Jim. Thank you for being here. Son Rob Wham and wife Jamie and their daughter Jessie. Thank you. Daughter Jenna, husband Brett Ryan. And their children Ben and wife Bridget, and children Everett and Freddie. And Lauren, I think I have. Sorry. It entered. And then Charlie Hebler for all the work to organize this memorial. And the senators that are attending with us is Senator Blickensderfer, Ed Perlmutter, Mike Feely, Paul Weissman, Bill Schroeder, Mo Keller, and Representative Jeff Shoemaker. So thank you all for being here.
Senator Kirkmeyer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I actually knew the good senator from Denver, Senator Wham, testified in front of her and spoke with her on numerous occasions. She was tough. She knew her stuff. Sometimes she could be a little bit on the mean side, depending on which county you were from. And but man, she was excellent to work with. You knew that when you went and spoke with her, she was going to tell it to you straight up, and she knew exactly what she was talking about. Well studied. I worked with her on a lot of the human services issues. Her and Senator Hopper, Sally Hopper, who is from Jefferson County, they both controlled that Human Services Committee, and they just would whip things through and knew what they were doing, so much so that they did not let the senator from Otero County, Senator Rizzuto, or the senator from Weld County, Senator Owen, who both were on the Joint Budget Committee, did not get to tell Senator Wham what to do. She told them what to do. So she was great, and she's a person that I would like to emulate and follow because she did so well. Thank you.
Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Please be seated, everybody.
Sorry. Majority Leader Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend Senate Rule 31A for the purpose of allowing former members of the House or Senate to address the body concerning this memorial.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and that motion is adopted. Members, we will now stand in recess to allow our former senators and representatives to address the body. The Senate will stand in recess. Members, if you wish to say a few words about Senator Wham, please make your way down to the well. Senator Keller.
Thank you, Mr. President, and members of the body and family members. It's a pleasure for me to be here to speak on my experiences with Senator Dottie Wham. Dottie was in the Senate in the 1990s when I was in the House of Representatives, and we carried quite a few bills together, especially on child welfare issues. Dottie was very interested and a champion in that area. One day, I saw Dottie at a memorial service for former Senator Claire Traylor. And if any of you remember Senator Traylor, she was a statesman, just like Dottie was a statesman. And she was in the parking lot, and she was crying her heart out. And, you know, what do you say to somebody when they're crying like that? But I went up to her and I said, gee, Dottie, I'm so sorry. And she looked at me and she said, it's all gone. It's all gone. And I realized that she was crying for the loss of her good friend and fellow statesman, Claire Traylor, but she was also crying for the loss of that particular group, that class of senators. And I refer to that particular group as the golden age of the Colorado State Senate. And I'm not the only one to think this way. Others have mentioned it as well. You had real statesmen like Dottie Wham, Claire Traylor, Mike Feely, Ed Perlmutter, Dave Wattenberg. And Dave Wattenberg, if you remember him, Sally Hopper, Bill Schroeder was part of that class, and there were others that were part of that class as well, who really believed in public service for its sake, and that they worked together bipartisanly on issues that were of benefit, as they saw it, for the citizens of the state of Colorado. Norma Anderson, who was a former senator and former House member as well, said once on the floor of the House, I think it was, if you're doing the right thing for the citizens of the state, you're doing the right thing for your party. So stop the squabbles and let's do the right thing. And that was the opinion, and that was the philosophy by which Dottie and all of her fellow statesmen worked in this deliberative body. They were thoughtful, and they worked across party lines all the time. And if Dottie came to me and said, I've got an amendment for your bill, I always, in fact, I almost always took it, partly because I probably had to, but the other was that it was well-reasoned. It was going to make that bill better, that her reasoning and her thoughts about that amendment were well thought through and well done. So I just think so highly of Dottie. I think of her upon occasion, even now, and hope that all of us can emulate the high standard for public service that she showed. Thank you.
Senator Weissman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I couldn't help but notice that Mo Keller didn't mention my name as part of the golden age of the Senate, but that's okay because they didn't pull down my composites either. So if you want to see me with more hair and skinnier, you got to go to the committee room. When I was elected in 1992 and joined the Senate in 1993, I was part of a group of 5 or so that were never supposed to be here. And it's because of Dottie Wham, who sat where Senator Smallwood is sitting now, I was sitting way in the back, that even though I wasn't supposed to be here, I felt welcome. She was very much, to me, a grandmother figure, although the same age as my parents, I guess, now that I look at it. But I was just a kid when I came down here. She was always free at giving advice and encouragement to me and others. I had a propensity, for example, not to wear a coat all the time in the chambers, and she one time told me something that I should have listened to then, but didn't listen to until I returned to the house. She said something akin to, don't repel them with style when you can bring them in with substance. She really sort of could narrow things down. And, you know, Senator Kirkmeyer said, you know, she was tough, and she knew her stuff, but she also had that twinkle. There was also this kindness in her eye that you caught all the time. I thought I was the only one until I read an article upon her death a couple years ago. I had a bill one time that would have gotten rid of all the mandatory minimums in the state. And she was chair of Judiciary Committee and obviously was against my bill. But I went in there, I presented, I had my folks present, I got hammered by the district attorneys, and at the end of the hearing, before any vote, Senator Wham looks at me and she says, Senator Weissman, would you like me to pull this off the table so that you can work on it a little bit? She didn't have to. She didn't have to, but she learned, she used it as a learning experience for a young member. To really what you need to do to try to get things done. It didn't matter that I was a Democrat and she was a Republican. It didn't matter that we disagreed on the issue. She thought it was best for the place, that we all knew how to get things done and how to work together. Senator Keller said it best. I mean, I don't know if it was the golden age or not, but it certainly was a different age. It was a different age when we trusted each other and worked together, and every time I feel like the old guy coming back, urging folks to do the same, because there's so much great work that could be done for the state. Senator Wham certainly showed that. A Republican from Denver, who wasn't afraid to really speak and vote her beliefs, even if they were at odds with her own party, even if they were at odds with her own constituents. She was solid, and she's missed.
Senator Perlmutter.
Thank you, Mr. President. I served with Dottie Wham on the Judiciary Committee for 6 years. And her husband, Bob, was an attorney, outstanding attorney. But had she been in that law firm, she would have been the senior partner. No question about it. Dottie Wham was the best legislator I've ever worked with, period, federal or state. As you've heard, she was smart. She was direct. Senator Kirkmeyer said that. She was direct. She was cunning when she had to be. She was funny. She was always prepared, and she was tough. She ran around with a crowd. They were mostly in that back row where you gentlemen are. Bill Schroeder and Dave Wattenberg and Al Mickeljohn, Sally Hopper, Donna Mint. They were excellent legislators and troublemakers, generally, okay? She tried to keep these guys in line, but didn't accomplish it very often. And from time to time, she'd let Senator Feely and me and Stan Matsunaka and Paul Weissman, although she always was worried about Paul, kind of get involved. She wrote almost single-handedly the Children's Code. We had an interim committee where we met all summer, and we would go late into the evening looking at every single word in the Children's Code, because that's how much she cared about the law and how much she cared about children. She was instrumental in implementing the Victims' Rights initiative that was passed by the people of this state. And again, she was great. One time, she was the head of the Capital Development Committee for years. And so I had the good fortune or misfortune to have to take a tour of all of our corrections facilities throughout the state. And we have a lot of corrections facilities. And after about 3 days of driving around in a couple corrections vans, I said, "Can we stop?" And she said, "No, we've still got a bunch more to do." So she was hardworking and indefatigable. Lastly, on our committee, Judiciary Committee, we had probably the most liberal Democrat I'd ever worked with, a guy named Bill Tebow, an attorney from Pueblo, and probably one of the most conservative Republicans, an attorney, Dick Mutzabaugh from Douglas County. Is Dick here? Oh, that's good. That's good. Now I can really say what I want to say about Mutzabaugh. No, But she managed over those years to keep that committee moving forward despite their opinions, despite their tenacity, and both of them were very tenacious in their positions, but we got work done. She was outstanding, and there's nobody I would rather have emulated as a legislator than Dottie Wham. I'm going to read something from Dorothy Gottlieb, who is in the State House, and she sent this as her statement. In its beginning, my relationship with Dottie Wham was complicated. And Dorothy Gottlieb, I had to read this first before I was prepared to read this out loud to all of you, because she could get a little spicy in some of the things she would say. House Districts 9 and 10 were always in competition. According to the ruling dynasty families in House District 9, and you know who you are, nothing good ever came out of House District 10. And after Representative Betty Neal, nothing good would ever come out of that district. I ran for House District 10 in 1996, and despite major attempts to derail me, including rampant rumors that I was an awful person, HD 10 voters thought better, and there I was, elected to the Colorado House, and a real 10 I was. Fast forward to my second term, a controversial bill on reproductive rights was brought to the floor. Being a real Republican, I wanted and still want the government out of my bedroom, my doctor's office, and my wallet as much as possible, so that is how I voted. Next thing I knew, Senator Wham, if you can believe it, came running over from the Senate, tapped me on my shoulder, gave me a big hug, and said, "You are what you said you were." That changed everything. We became buds, worked on and co-sponsored such bills as HB 99-1353, concerning programs for persons convicted of a crime in another state. Senator Wham, you led a wonderful and productive life. Few could match you. I am glad you were my friend, and you are missed. Dorothy Gottlieb.
Senator Schroeder.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, that surprises me. I was the caucus chair for 12 years, and when I first came in, we had 25 Republican senators. That ought to tell you what the number is on the other side. And, but anyway, Dottie came in, and as part of the caucus, we'd all get together. It was before we had that legislation which says you couldn't get your caucus binded. We never bound our caucus. We always got 18 votes. And then we don't care what the rest of you did, but 18 votes. So every now and then, Dottie and Claire Traylor, who I admired greatly, both of them, would be a challenge in the caucus meetings of some of the issues that came aboard when you're trying to do the long bill, which I think you've all experienced. And so Dottie was tough, but she was fair, and the stuff that she cared about, I think you've heard about already, was families, children, and health. You've heard about Scott McInnes. Dottie was also chosen by the Women of Distinction. I think it's called the Denver Women of Distinction in 2001 as one of the greater women in the legislature and in the Denver area. Dottie was, like I said, just superb. I loved her very much. She was a great person. She even worked for, somebody might know, Ike Eisenhower. She worked for Ike and his campaign for president. And then there's one last thing I'd like to throw out. Oh, by the way, Senator Anderson, who some of you might not know, she was the majority leader in the House and the majority leader in the Senate for a while. But anyway, Charlie Hebler, who I read a quote from her and about Dottie, and she was the ultimately practitioner, a fierce defender of women's rights to health care, and could put together very complex public policy and she worked with everyone, and that's true. No matter whether you're Republican or Democrat, she worked with everyone. I consider Dottie one of the finer women. I've met and served with a lot of great women, but Dottie, Senator Claire Traylor, and that lady right up there, Ruth Stockton. Both Claire and Ruth are from Jefferson County. And that's where I was elected, from Jefferson County. But of all the women I've met, Dottie fits into that category. She is terrific, and she did a great job for the state.
Senator Feely.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate you putting these pictures up here. I hope you all get a chance to stop by. There's some very good-looking senators in our past. Please stop by. I don't want to take too long, and I appreciate the comments that have been made. Dottie was, notwithstanding her integrity or collegiality and her hard work, one of the things, she had a tremendous sense of humor. I mean, she was a funny woman. So I'll tell one story. I wasn't planning on telling this, but we found ourselves sitting together on the Senate Finance Committee one day. We were up in that office in the corner, or that room in the corner, and we didn't usually sit there. I don't know how we ended up, but I'm sitting in the back in the corner with Dottie, and the apiary folks came in to seek ag classification for their beekeeping operations. And so I'm just hearing this, and Dottie turns to me and she says, "Oh, this is not a good idea, is it?" I said, I don't know, I don't know what is going on. She said, "This isn't agriculture. How do you herd bees?" And I said, "I don't know." So she probably gave me a demonstration of how a border collie would herd bees and started going, "Yip, yip, yip." We were like the second grade children in the back of a classroom who couldn't be controlled anymore. And the whole, it stopped. And the only thing I can tell you is that the apiaries still do not have egg classification today. So I just wanted to join some of my colleagues to remember Dottie. She was an absolutely terrific woman. And I know the family, I know you appreciated her sense of humor, and it's just such an honor to have been able to serve with her. Thank you very much.
Senator Blickensderfer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know now from here on out, whenever I hear somebody say herding cats, I'll just substitute herding bees. Thank you, Senator Feely. Dottie was one of the two people you didn't want to see strolling down this aisle when you were arguing your case, especially if you knew you were in a controversial and certainly perhaps a losing position. But she'd, by the way, the other person who you didn't want to see stroll down the aisle was Senator Tebow, who was mentioned earlier. Two of the most logical legislators in the whole place. But Dottie would often come walking down the aisle, and she'd come up to this microphone after I'd spelled out my case, and she'd just give a long sigh. Senator Blickensderfer. And you knew from there on you just better strap in and do your very best, because it was going to be a long, difficult road of facing down her logic. I was her vice chair on Judiciary, and she turned to me. I think it was more for show than anything else, because I never really was much of a lawyer, but we'd talk legal stuff and make our way through it. She had the ability to give credit where credit is due. I carried a piece of legislation that was sort of the centerpiece of everything I'd done around here that had to do with school finance. And it was pretty controversial over here, and when it went back to the House, it was a House bill. The House immediately killed it, and Speaker George, in his wisdom, was able to amend it onto one of his own bills, which he shared with Dottie. So this great piece of work was under two names that didn't have my name on it other than a co-sponsor. But all that aside, when that was amended and sent back over here, Dottie just came to the microphone and handed me the bill and said, "You take it." And she did indeed know to give where credit where it was due. The other great quality that she showed was that she could help her colleagues, and I think most of us experience this, help colleagues save face. Because as you know, down here at the microphone, it's pretty easy to get sideways on what you're trying to do, and somehow she would come through and on her white steed and save the day, and thank goodness, because sometimes we got into things way over our heads. God bless you, Dottie.
Representative Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Charlie Hebler, thank you. Thank you for this day. Okay? Thanks for not forgetting my phone number. Thank you. My name is Jeff Shoemaker. It's an honor to stand in this chamber as a former member of the House, and I think I have a pretty distinct honor because other than you, Nancy, and other than you, Jeannie, I think I have known Dottie Wham longer than anybody else on the face of this planet. And I tell you that because my father, former Senator Joe Shoemaker, who, Senator Coleman, you're sitting in my dad's seat from all these years ago. And my father, Joe, and later Senator Bob Wham were on the cabinet of Mayor Dick Batterton in the late 50s and early 60s. And that friendship led to a 30-plus year law partnership. And so I have known Dottie Wham since I was 4 years old. She was a friend. She was a second mom. She was, and I'll get to that in a minute, a mentor. But there was Senator Joe Shoemaker, Mr. Joint Budget Committee, who served on the JVC with Ruth Stockton. And when my father left the Senate, his successor was Senator Robert Wham. And then in 1984, I had just moved back to Denver from Colorado Springs, and Senator Joe Shoemaker and Senator Bob Wham sat with future State Representative Dottie Wham, and I had been in the district all of 4 or 5 weeks when my father said, congratulations, you're in precinct 1111. You are now the precinct chair, and you are going to help me get Dottie elected. And that's how the game worked. And then when Dottie, through a vacancy, moved from the House to the Senate, I had the honor of being elected to replace her in the State House. So that's how far back we go. Dottie loved this chamber. Dottie loved this Capitol. Dottie loved the art of politics, but also the statesmanship of politics. And she exemplified both. She was whip smart. She was whip sage, whip kind, and whip tough. And you've heard that word tough. She was also whip fair. And you want to talk about crossing the aisle. Time after issue, after bill, after resolution, after measure, she did. She was fair. She was honest. And God knows she was candid. And those are all good things. And she took on tough issues. And remember, and I am a husband, a father of 4 daughters, a grandfather of 3 granddaughters. We got a female cat in our house. We got an aquarium. All the fish are women, I'm convinced 100%. So I bring that up to tell you that it's my understanding there are more women in the state legislature than men at this point. It's about damn time, okay? And I say that both tongue-in-cheek and honestly because you need to remember something. In 1984, in 1986, and on, it was a different world than it is today. It just was. It didn't matter to her. She didn't wear her gender on her sleeve. She wore her beliefs. She wore her values. She wore and led with her heart and also with her head. And she took on social issues, and you've heard children's issues, and you've heard medical issues that nobody, man, woman, House, Senate, were willing to take on. And let's start with the issue. Let us remember the issue of AIDS. And she de-demonized a medical condition. She took politics out of a medical condition, and she brought humanity into that situation, and she forged a bipartisan solution. So we remembered medicine before politics. I will leave you with this. Descriptors. Second mom, mentor, teacher, leader, and she made the best damn chocolate chip cookies that you could ever have in your life. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members.
Thank you all to the former members who came to speak. The Senate will come back to order. Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I renew my motion for the adoption of Senate Joint Memorial 001 and request a roll call vote.
The motion is the adoption of Senate Joint Memorial 1, and there has been a request for a roll call vote. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Senators Baisley, Baisley, aye. Bridges, Bridges, aye. Buckner, Buckner, aye. Coleman, Coleman, aye. Cutter, Cutter, aye. Danielson, excused. Exum, Exum, aye. Fields, Fields, aye. Gardner, Gardner, aye. Janal, Janal, aye. Gonzalez, Gonzalez, aye. Hanson, Hanson, aye. Hinrichsen, Hinrichsen, aye. Hawkes Lewis, Hawkes Lewis, aye. Kirkmeyer, Kirkmeyer, aye. Kolker, Kolker, aye. Liston, Liston, aye. Lundeen, Lundeen, aye. Marchman, Marchman, aye. Moreno, Moreno, aye. Mullica, Mullica, aye. Pelton B, Pelton B, aye. Pelton R, Pelton R, aye. Priola, Priola, aye. Rich, Rich, aye. Roberts, Roberts, aye. Rodriguez, Rodriguez, aye. Simpson, Simpson, aye. Smallwood, Smallwood, aye. Sullivan, Sullivan, aye. Van Winkle, Van Winkle, aye. Will, Will, aye. Winter, Winter, aye. Zenzinger, Zenzinger, aye. Blickensderfer, Blickensderfer, aye. Perlmutter, Perlmutter, aye. Feely, Feely, aye. Weissman, Weissman, aye. Schroeder, Schroeder, aye. Keller, Keller, aye. Mr. President,
Aye.
President, aye.
With a vote of 34 ayes, 0 no, 0 absent, 1 excused, Senate Joint Memorial is adopted. Senator Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request the current roll call be added as co-sponsors.
Seeing no objection, the current roll call will be added as co-sponsors of Senate Joint Memorial 1. Members, we will stand in a brief recess to greet our guests.